I was sitting in my car in a parking garage on a Wednesday afternoon, not crying, not thinking, just sitting. Engine off. A grocery bag of things I didn't actually need in the back seat because I'd gone into the store to feel something normal and come out with sparkling water and a candle that smelled like cedar. Ethan had just told me that morning that he wanted to spend the weekend at his dad's. Fine, normal, of course. And yet I sat there in the gray concrete dark thinking, is this it? Is this who I am now? This woman who buys candles she doesn't need and cries in parking garages on Wednesdays? I didn't know then that I was in the middle of something, not at the end of it, the middle. Welcome to Breathe and Begin. I'm Sarah, psychologist, single mom, former physicist, and a woman who has spent the better part of her adult life thinking she was broken when she was actually just unfinished. If you've ever looked in the mirror and not quite recognized the person staring back, not in a frightening way, but in a "who is this and where's the version of me I was supposed to be by now" way, then you're exactly where you need to be today. If something lands for you, leave a comment. Tell me where you are. Those words do more than you know. And if you're new here, stay. We have a lot to talk about. Today, I want to talk about becoming, about the unbearable patience it requires, about why the person you are right now, in the middle of whatever this is not a failed version of you. They're a necessary one. We have this idea, and I think it comes from stories, from movies, from every graduation speech ever given, that there's a moment when you become, a threshold you cross, a before and after. I spent years waiting for mine. After Ben died, I thought, when I stop grieving, I'll be okay. After the divorce, I thought, when I get through this, I'll be myself again. After the move to Portland, the first hard year of solo parenting, the night I sat in my office until 10 because I couldn't bear the quiet of the house, when things settle, when the kids sleep through the night, when I'm not so tired. And here's what nobody tells you. The arrival doesn't come, not like that, not as a moment. The self you're building isn't waiting for you on the other side of your suffering. It's being built in the suffering, molecule by molecule, day by day, in the parking garages and the sparkling water and the candles that smell like cedar. You are not on the way to becoming someone. You are already in it. I was a physicist before I was a psychologist. I loved physics because it was honest. The laws didn't change based on how you felt about them. A thing was either in motion or it wasn't. Forces acted on bodies in predictable ways. I think I spent the first half of my life trying to apply those rules to my own transformation. If I applied enough force, I would accelerate. If I could just identify the variables, I could solve for X, where X was the stable, healed, fully formed version of me. It turns out that's not how people work. People are not projectiles. You cannot calculate the trajectory of a grief. You cannot solve for the woman you're becoming. What I know now, from 20 years of sitting across from people in my small Portland office, is that human transformation doesn't follow a force equation. It follows something closer to a garden. You prepare the soil, you plant things in the dark, you water them without being sure what's growing. And then one day, usually a Tuesday, because it's always a Tuesday, something green comes up through the dirt, and you think, oh, there it is. But you can't rush Tuesday. You could only keep watering. Can I tell you something I've never said quite this way before? At 21, I had a plan. Not a detailed plan, more like a feeling of a plan. By 30, I'd be a physicist, published maybe, happy, married to someone who loved stars as much as I did. We'd have a dog with a ridiculous name and a small apartment that smelled like coffee and books. I had someone to put in that plan. Then, the man who found me in a pub corner and said I looked like I was calculating the odds of a meteor strike. The man who proposed with a silver ring and called himself my constant. He was gone by 22, and the plan didn't just fall apart, it dissolved. And I spent years grieving not just him, but her, the woman I was supposed to have been by now. I see this in my office all the time. The woman who's 43 and thought she'll have by now. The man who's 38 and thought he'd have figured out his purpose. The client I'll call Daniel, who told me, I feel like I'm years behind where I'm supposed to be. And I asked him, behind what schedule? Filed by whom? He didn't have an answer. We never do. The schedule is fiction. The grief about being behind it is real. Both of those things are true, and you're allowed to hold both. Here's the part nobody puts in the Instagram post about growth. Becoming someone new requires losing someone old, and that loss is real. It deserves to be mourned. When I left my marriage, when I finally admitted that the safe harbor had become a cage, I lost more than a husband I'd outgrown. I lost the story I'd told myself about what my life was going to look like, the stability, the intact family, the version of motherhood I'd imagined. And even though leaving was right, even though I knew it with the cold clarity you sometimes get when the last piece of evidence finally lands, even so, I grieved what I was leaving behind. And sometimes, listen, this is the part people don't say. Sometimes you grieve the old self even when she was making you miserable, even when she was keeping you small. Because she was familiar, and familiar is another word for safe. And safe is a very seductive thing when you've already lost so much. If you're in a transition right now and you're grieving the person you used to be, even though you know that person wasn't serving you, that's not weakness. That's not contradiction. That's just what becoming feels like from the inside. I'm going to tell you about the moment I actually changed, because it didn't look like change at all. It was a gray Tuesday, drizzle. There was spilled milk, literally spilled milk, and a fight about rain boots, and I was running 17 minutes late and holding it together with whatever structural integrity a person has left at 7:47 in the morning when they haven't slept properly in 4 months. And Ethan, 7 years old, looked up at me from the back seat and asked, "Mom, are you happy?" And I could not lie. The lie caught in my throat like something solid. I pulled over on a residential street and I wept. Not delicately, not in the way you weep when you're trying to keep your mascara on, but genuinely, completely, in the kind of way that uses your whole body. And then a small hand appeared on my shoulder and my son said, "It's okay, Mommy. You can be sad." 7 years old. He gave me permission I hadn't known I needed. That moment didn't fix anything. I want to say that clearly. My life didn't reorganize itself after that. But something in me decided, in the way a seed decides spring, that I was going to stop treating my own happiness as a luxury I'd get to eventually. And everything that came after, the practice, the fuller presence with my kids, the way I stopped sabotaging the people who were actually good for me, all of it traces back to that Tuesday. Not a dramatic transformation, a decision made on a wet street between rain boots and spilled milk. In therapy, we talk about something called post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where people who've been through significant hardship sometimes find themselves on the other side with capacities they didn't have before. More compassion, more clarity about what matters, a different relationship with fear. I want to be careful here, because this concept is sometimes used in ways that flatten suffering, that turn pain into a productivity tool, a character upgrade, a before and after that tidies up the mess. That's not what I mean. What I mean is simpler, harder, less photogenic. Growth mostly feels like confusion, like not knowing who you are for a while, like trying on responses to situations and noticing that the old ones don't fit the same way. Like being in the gap between the person you were and the person you're still becoming, and having no clean language for that gap. A woman I'll call Nina sat across from me last spring and said, "I feel like I'm not myself anymore, but I don't know who else to be." And I said, "That's exactly right. You're in the between, and the between is uncomfortable, but it's not empty. Things are happening in there. You might be in the between right now. That's not failure. That's not stagnation. That's the chrysalis doing its invisible work." There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi. You may have heard of it, where broken pottery is repaired with gold lacquer. The philosophy behind it is that the breakage and the repair are part of the object's history, not something to hide. I have a complicated relationship with this metaphor because it's been a little overused in wellness spaces, and also because when you're in the middle of being broken, nobody wants to hear about future gold. When I was drinking myself into a kitchen floor at 23, "Someday this will be beautiful" would have been, I'm going to be honest, profoundly unhelpful. But years out from it, I understand something different. It's not that the breaking made me better in some tidy, redemptive way. It's that the breaking happened, and I survived it. And in surviving it, I learned things about myself that I could not have learned any other way. The grief of losing Ben taught me that I was capable of more love than I knew. The darkness after taught me that asking for help, 3 words, Dad, I need help, was the bravest thing I'd ever do. The marriage that didn't work taught me what I actually needed, which I'd never had to know before. None of it was worth it. All of it became something. I can hold both of those things. I had to learn how. I want to give you something today that nobody gave me for a very long time. Permission to be unfinished. You don't have to have it figured out. You don't have to be the person you'll be in 5 years. You're not a failure because you're still in process. You're a person, living a life. That's all this is. I'm in my mid-40s. I still have sessions with my own therapist where I discover something about myself I didn't know. I still make choices I look back on and think, really? Just last month, I called my mother in Ohio, which I do every Sunday, and she asked how I was, and I said fine with such reflexive certainty that I was halfway through the call before I realized I'd done it again. The oldest habit of my life, the one I learned at 12 when she got sick, and I decided that strength meant not taking up space. 4 decades. I still catch it in the act. And I'm a psychologist. I literally know better. The point isn't to be done becoming. The point is to stay curious about who you're becoming. Those are very different things. Here's what I want you to hear. The patience this requires is not passive. It is not waiting. It is not resignation. It is not the spiritual version of staring at your phone. The patience of becoming is active. It looks like showing up for the Tuesday even when you're tired. It looks like the therapy appointment you keep, even when you feel like you're just talking in circles. It looks like the conversation with your kid, or your friend, or the person you've been avoiding being honest with. It looks like the choice, made quietly, to tell the truth about how you are, instead of saying fine. It looks like staying in your own life, even when your own life is hard. I have a client, I'll call him Marcus, who told me once, I feel like I've been working on myself for 5 years and I'm still not where I want to be. And I asked him, where were you 5 years ago? And he went quiet, because the answer was a different person, a smaller one who couldn't have sat here and said what he just said. The work had happened, he just couldn't see it from the inside. You're probably further along than you think. The people who can't see their own growth are usually the ones who've been doing the most of it. I'm going to bring you back to a parking garage on a Wednesday afternoon. The woman sitting in that car with her sparkling water and her cedar candle, she didn't know she was becoming anything. She thought she was just tired. She thought she was just someone who sometimes cried between the grocery store and the drive home. But that woman was also, in that same moment, the woman who had survived a grief that would have swallowed some people whole, who had looked at her life honestly enough to leave something safe for something true, who had heard her son say, you can be sad, and let that in, and carried it forward, and built a practice from it, a whole room full of people who needed someone to sit with them in their own unsolvable middles. She didn't know that yet. She couldn't see it from inside the gray concrete of the parking garage. But she went home, she made dinner, she tucked in her kids. She did the thing that looks like nothing, just continuing. And continuing turned out to be everything. The person you're becoming is built from exactly what you're doing right now. The surviving, the showing up, the small, quiet, unglamorous act of remaining in your own life and trying. They're worth the wait. I promise you that. If this found you at the right moment, leave a comment. Tell me where you are in your becoming, not where you want to be, where you actually are. That's the only honest place to start, and honesty is what we do here. Subscribe if you want to keep going. We're not done yet. Neither are you. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're right in the middle of something, and that's exactly where you're supposed to be.